Well, we just had a cold front move through, touched off some pretty strong thunderstorms. I knew it was going to rain, so I covered it up. But the nice thing about that storm is it was a front, so all this humidity that we had that was pretty oppressive for the last couple of days is finally broken. So great time to get back out here and work on the tractor. So I'm going to see what we can do about doing a little further disassembly. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to remove the starter, and just for the heck of it, I'm going to see if I can take, this is called the adapter, this assembly right here. I'm going to see whether or not I can get that off. Well, removing that was easy enough, and when I removed it, the thrust bearing fell down, so the outer race and the thrust bearing are now down in there. So I'm going to have to tap out this inner race to get that all apart. I could do that later. Pretty sure I bought a pickle fork, but I can't find it. Pickle fork, for those of you who don't know, is it's a steel metal rod with two prongs on it like that at the end, that the prongs are flattened to a point, and basically you stick it right in there, and because it's gets wider, it's basically you get a wedging action. So when you bang it in there, it wedges this part away from this part and pops that tapered end of this bolt, this tie rod, out of there. But since I don't have it, what I'm doing is I've loosened up the nut so that I can now tap on the end of this, and I won't be damaging the threads. I'm not going to wail on it. I'm hoping it's not too tight. Well, that's tight enough that I would have to bang on this a lot harder than I want to, and I don't want to damage the threads on this, so I'm going to hold off on this for now. I'm going to go take another look in another spot where I think I might have that pickle fork tool. So now I'm going to take the starter out. Well, I unbolted the starter and moved it out of the way. I don't have to completely remove it. I didn't even have to undo the cables, because I only need to move it out of the way far enough to get to these two cap screws over here. But now I'm getting a much better look at what it looked like welding work that I had seen. And I could see that there's a bead. I scraped off the paint to make sure it isn't JB weld, but it doesn't appear to be a JB weld type product. It appears to be a downright bead. So it looks like somebody went arc weld happy on this thing and welded this thing right down to the tractor. Looks like so. This part back here is welded down to the actual transmission housing. This little section over here on this back side looks like it's all welded down to this transmission cover right here, this cover assembly. So that sucker's in there good. So if I want to completely remove the entire steering gear from the tractor and work on it on the bench, I'm looking at some serious grinding that I'm going to have to do. So that's making me rethink how I want to handle this. And I'm thinking at this point what I want to do is maybe see if I can effect the repairs with it still mounted to the tractor, since it's semi-permanently mounted. Alright, so I'm going to go see if I can find that pickle fork and see if I can't separate these tie rod ends off of these arms, and then that way I can look at a couple of things like maybe the backlash. Alright, well, I got this one off. I didn't end up finding my pickle fork, but I just got a little bit less friendly with it and got it out. And no, I didn't damage the threads. I kept the nut on there, and I banged it just hard enough to get that out without damaging the threads. So now that I get this tie rod disconnected, this small tie rod down this end, watch this. That sucker's cooked. So that'll give you a little bit of a play issue. what is that? Almost a half inch of movement. So now I'm starting to get a better idea how bad this steering gear is. If I move this arm, I can actually move this arm back and forth, and I've got some play in it. But what's more interesting to me is that when I move this arm back and forth this way, what's actually happening on this side is this arm is actually moving up and down like that. So this whole shaft right in here is rocking in there like this. That's kind of an exaggeration, but this is basically what's going on with that shaft as I rotate this. So I'm going to take this cylinder off and get that out, because I'm going to need to inspect and repair that as necessary. And also what that's going to do for me is that's going to take the disengage the rack on the cylinder from the rest of the steering gear, so it'll be acting more like a manual steering gear. Well, I've never had one of these apart before, but I know it's not supposed to look like this. What we got here, from the looks of it, I think this metal square piece I've got right here is actually the end of the rack gear. I think it's snapped off right here. So no wonder why the power steering's not working. In other words, this piece right here is supposed to be able to just slide out from that and stay behind with the rack gear, and it's snapped off right there. So that's horrible thing number one. And then if I look in the hole that I just took that out of, you can see horrible things. My battery's dying, but hopefully you'll get to see what I'm seeing here. Chunk of metal. Chunk of metal. Chunk of metal. Chunk of metal. These look like rollers from inside a bearing. I'm wondering if that the big bearing in there that one of these arms shafts is supposed to ride in is just completely failed. Would explain the wobbling shaft syndrome. Well, I can't really get anything else out of here now. Well, let me see if I can take this, disconnect this tie rod end here and see if I can't take this. Alright, this has just gone from bad, real bad, to worse on so many levels. One of the problems with these gears is that these shafts with the gears on them inside there, the big ones, those parts aren't available. Most of the big major internal parts aren't available any longer for this unless you find them at a junkyard. And the problem is, if you call a junkyard, based on what I've read online, guys who've tried to get these parts have all found the same thing. Salvage yard, he's got a tractor with a steering gear in it. He's not going to want to take it apart and sell you the parts inside. He's only going to sell you the complete steering gear. And the money they want for a complete used working steering gear or rebuildable steering gear is big bucks. We're talking over $1,000 is what they're typically going for, which is a damn shame. But they pretty much know, they've got a product that's not anymore being made. So the reason why I'm saying all this is because, well, I said this is all welded down. This bracket right here has 2 bolts in it. This bolt was never put back in. Camera battery's dying, so it's cutting out. I'm gonna try and make this quick. My problem is with this welded down, I don't know how I'm gonna get this bolt out right here. But then while the camera was off, I went in there and I actually found I was able to just get the open end wrench on it. And that bolt is really loose, and I can imagine why. They probably weren't able to tighten it because of the fact that they weren't able to really get a wrench on there. There's no clearance because you're supposed to be able to get on that from the back underside if this was off on a bench. But it looks like I'm going to be able to get that one out after all. And then these other ones, I mean, they're so loose I can almost turn them with my fingers. That's how loose that whole cover assembly is. Well, it's after supper. I came back out here with fresh batteries. What I was talking about before was that The big problem that I was foreseeing because of the way that this is welded down is how I was going to get this this bolt out right here. As luck would have it, it was very loose, and I was able to just get an open end wrench on it, turn it like an eighth turn a few times, and then I was able to take it out with my fingers. Otherwise it would have been difficult because of the clearance issue I've got here. I can't get a socket in there. So ideally, how to take that bolt out would be if the whole steering gear was on the bench top. It'd be easy. You'd have all the room in the world to get a wrench on there. But so far I was able to deal with that. I've gotten all the other bolts out. They were all very loose, with the exception of this one here. It was a through bolt, and it's weird because it's got a nut on this side, but the nut doesn't want to come off. It just kept turning and turning and turning. So it's almost like somebody fashioned a bolt out of a stud. So I don't know what the deal is there, but took that off. And then, interestingly enough, that whole deal is repeated right here. So I'm going to take that one out now. Oh, one last thing. I decided before I take that one out, I'm going to try and take this nut off and take this arm off. Because once I take that nut out, that whole cover is going to be loose, and it's going to be harder for me to work on getting this nut off.